Who is the most evil person who is still alive today? Story 1. Don't forget Dominique Pellicot, who drugged and violated his wife, Chil, for over 9 years, and the 50 other men who participated. Answer. Yeah, but the whole point of this trial was to show that this is not a so rare thing. And if those men are the most evil, then a high percentage of the human population is evil. That's the point. No, those men are not monsters. They're everywhere. They're anyone. Carol Darien, Gisel's daughter, who's also a victim, is fighting to make the world know about chemical submission and how commonly it is used by abusers. Story 2. Josef Fritzl, the guy who kept his daughter locked in a basement for 24 years, violated her repeatedly, and fathered 7 children with her. He is still alive. I think he is one of the most evil person of the century. Answer. Just reading all the recovery process for the daughter and her children really made me cry. One sick, fudge human being. He feels no remorse. On the Wikipedia, it quotes him saying, "Just look into the homes of other families. They probably have their daughters and children down there too. Sick fudge blessing to the daughter and her children's, to experience some normalcy for the rest of their life." Story 3. There was a guy, an intimacy trafficker in India or Bangladesh, interviewed by Ross Kemp. Can't remember the guy's name, but he used to kidnap girls from villages and sell them into prostitution. Teens. And he talked about finding ones who'd run away and eliminate them. He'd eliminate hundreds of children. The only time I've seen Kemp have to step away from the interview cause he was gonna hurt the guy. Hope that CVNT is eaten alive by maggots. Story 4. Not commonly brought up on Reddit, but Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, better known by his nickname Hemedti. Hemedti is the commander of the RSF in Sudan, one of the primary belligerents in the Sudanese civil war right now, who is actively waging a campaign of genocidal annihilation against the country's African minorities in the Darfur region. He is largely responsible for the overall civil war in Sudan, which is eliminate more people than every other active war on the planet combined. It was recently estimated that more than 522,000 children have died of starvation in Sudan since the civil war began. And hundreds of thousands of other people have been eliminated through massacres and the fighting. It could possibly be the bloodiest war of the whole 21st century, and yet you hardly ever hear a fudge peep about it in the Western world at all. Hemedti is one of this century's greatest villains, and yet his name is hardly even known outside of a few niche circles. It's maddening. Answer. Thank you for bringing up Hemedti. Him and his forces are committing genocide and every war crime imaginable currently in Sudan. I also want to point out that this is not the first genocide he has committed. Him and his Janjaweed forces were committing genocide. The RSF are basically the Janjaweed rebranded, 20 years ago to the same people. He's only one I know of to commit multiple genocides years apart. Story 5. Arguably, Richard Sackler started the opioid addiction epidemic in the USA, caused the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people simply to make money. Doesn't give a toss. Answer. And an unintended consequence is that actual pain patients are treated like criminals now because of all the substances-seeking behavior. My wife had severe lower back pain from disc damage in her spine and had to wait several months to have surgery. She was offered minimal pain meds for something that 20 years ago would have gotten unlimited painkillers. She disliked opioids. They make her puke and constipate her, something awful. But she was begging for them, the pain was so bad. And between the addicts and pharma execs, the world has gone batshit. Story 6. Robert Ben Rhodes, the truck stop killer. Over 15 years suspected of eliminate 50 women all across the country. He also eliminated my biological father before I got to meet him. Story 7. Wild that nobody has mentioned Anders Behring Breivik, the guy responsible for shooting up a summer camp for children in Norway and also bombing Parliament. Story 8. Ramzan Kadyrov, the head of Chechen Republic, has been investigated repeatedly for human rights violations against his people for decades. Look up the story of what he did to a kid over a comment on his Instagram Live. Answer: surprised that I needed to scroll so much before reaching the comment. Child brides, as in multiple, yes. Violation, extrajudicial killings left and right. Not abiding any laws, siphoning out millions of... It's maddening that people who associate themselves with him are not investigated. I'm looking at the MMA scene. But hey, not like an average MMA fan is against raping kids and eliminate gay people these days. Story 9. There are definitely more evil people, but the first that comes to mind right now is an Australian pedophile who was caught about a month ago, Joshua Dale Brown. He was an early childhood educator, daycare worker. He has like 70 counts against babies between, I think, 5 months and 2 years old, worked at about 20 centers over several years, and authorities have asked parents of 2,000 kids to get their kids tested for STIs, as he was allegedly doing things with their food. I work in childcare. It is a huge deal right now for everyone in the sector. I'm usually against the passing penalty, but that fudge deserves it. Answer: as someone who is also an Australian, I also say Joshua is more evil than the Australian version's Bill Cosby. I forgot his name, but he was a big star in the 60s and 70s, and he drugged and violation people. I'd also like to mention Andrew O'Keefe, who is a big ol' hypocrite by being a big part of the right ribbon movement, yet beats women, including his ex-wife, and has numerous substances-related problems. Edit. Thank you, You Mysterious, Song 3590, for giving me the name and for telling me that White Ribbon rightfully sacked Andrew's jerk. I also found an old conversation on Today, too. Story 10. Kenneth Copeland. I don't know if he's actually done anything evil, but if you look him up, he just looks like a freaking demon. Story 11. The better question is, who is the most evil person who is still alive and freely walking among us? Story 12. Andrew Wakefield, the guy who turbocharged the vaccines cause autism BS. Generations of kids worldwide are suffering and will continue to suffer because of his invented science. Answer: what terrifies and infuriates me about Wakefield isn't just the fact that he pushed that bullshit, but the fact that so many people bought into it. A shitload of people decided they'd rather risk their child dying of measles than living while autistic. As an autistic person, that is the greatest example I can think of that demonstrates just how many people fear and dislike us. Story 13. Ilse Rupert Murdoch. He's been running News Corp since 1952. That's right, 73 years. He's used it to destroy public institutions, create fear and hatred, encourage endless wars, and attack democracy, becoming more powerful and doing more damage every decade. He knows more about how to bring out the worst in people than any human in history. His machinations and manipulations were responsible for the election of Thatcher, John Howard, Bush, and Trump. He was the biggest cheerleader for the invasion of Iraq and has done all he can to prevent meaningful action on climate change. YSK, that News Corps, was secretly founded in 1922 by a cabal of Australian mining magnates, specifically to make propaganda to advance their interests, and it has never been a genuine news organization. Story 14. Mengistu is still sitting pretty in a suburban house near a golf course in Gunhill near Harare, as far as we know. His regime led to 500k 2M Ethiopians eliminate. This is the guy who said, "There is no communism without a red terror," and his Red Terror was described by Human Rights Watch as one of the most systematic uses of mass takedown by a state ever witnessed in Africa. Lots of students hung from lampposts in those days, but Mugabe didn't care about that part and gave the guy asylum because he helped him during the Rhodesian Bush War, and he gets to dodge any consequences and spend time on the police golf course if he likes. I'm mad about it. Story 15. Itamar Ben-Gvir. He's head of security in Israel, and holy shoot is he bad. This man wants to wipe out all Arabs, cosplayed Baruch Goldstein, a mass shooter who shot up a mosque, has a picture of him in his house, took his now wife, who was 15 at the time, to his grave on their first date while he was in his 20s, was not allowed to join the IDF due to how extreme he was, has pulled out a gun at Arabs for the most minuscule reasons, had his house in the West Bank, has been involved in major land stealing, dehumanized children who were eliminated by the IDF, calling them terrorists, spreads vile propaganda that would make Goebbels blush, was slightly possibly involved with the eliminate of Yitzhak Rabin, and has stated that it is okay to shoot at Palestinian women and children. Answer: I'm Israeli. Let me tell you this. He resembles everything that's wrong with our country. He is a lunatic, crazy man, and he ruins Israelis' and Palestinians' lives altogether. I dislike him with every bone in my body. He got my best friend of years dead. The things you mentioned above, it's not even everything. Check out his activities on 2021. He tried and still trying to turn Israel into a dictatorship. Story 16. Then Shui, Min Aung Hlaing, and all of those military dictators. Countless innocent lives and hopeless dreams of the decades. Story 17. Ian Watkins, lead singer of Lost Prophets. I remember reading the court documents about what he did, and it was horrific. Story 18. Not enough people know Dr. Aubrey Levin. He was the head of the Aversion Project, a program in South Africa during the 60s and 70s, during which suspected gay soldiers would undergo painful shock therapy, forced intimacy reassignment surgery, and therapy to cure them. He also threw in some people suffering from addiction, conscientious objectors, and mentally ill people because this wasn't about therapy or science or helping people. It was about getting off on torturing people he disliked. If they weren't cured, they were sent to a place called Greifswald, a farm which was actually a labor camp, where prisoners were forced to work and deprived of food and sleep and not able to contact their families. He personally oversaw the building of this camp. Many of the hundreds of victims, over 900 is the estimate, committed tragic end during or after the program. He fled to Canada and spent many wonderful happy years not in jail or suffering any consequences of any kind, torturing new patients as a psychiatrist at University of Calgary until 2010, when somebody came forward with intimacy assault charges. He was stroking people's male body part during therapy, despite 30 other victims coming forward. He was only sentenced to 5 years and got out of jail after 18 months. Story 19. This question is interesting because you could measure it in terms of total lives affected, or you could measure it in terms of the intensity of the evil on a more individual level. I would say Putin is one of the most evil, but he's also very personally disconnected from the passing and destruction he's commanding. No serial killer alive could compete with the eliminate count of a warmongering dictator. But does that count as the most evil? Story 20. Netanyahu and his lead is widening. I have an old Jewish friend who breaks down in tears thinking of the dead of Gaza because she lost an older half-brother in the passing camps, and she cannot understand how anyone claiming to be a Jew could even think of doing what he does without a second's compunction. Story 21. The guys who are responsible for torturing Junko Furuta, It's sickening. After relatively short prison sentences, they were allowed to have full immunity and a new identity, and they now live a normal life. Story 22. Putin. Over 1 million deaths, many millions wounded, and so many million lives ruined. But it's Russians who are to blame, not only Putin. Answer: definitely Putin. His people bear some responsibility, but they are force-fed propaganda from birth, so it's kind of tough when something like 70 of their curriculum growing up is brainwashing. Their internet is extremely censored, and the government rules with an iron fist. It's hard for much of the world to imagine what it's like to live under such a regime. Why don't Americans fight back? We're rich, educated, armed, and have plenty of reasons to why living under the most corrupt administration in our history. Story 23. The entire Sackler family. They are the pack of rich, predatory monsters who single-handedly plunged the United States into the opioid epidemic for no other reason than to line their pockets. They tore apart millions of families, caused untold passing, destruction, and heartbreak, and they will never see any punishment for their actions. Our corrupt courts allowed them to buy themselves complete immunity. I pray there is a hell so that they can all burn forever. Story 24. Anyone who runs healthcare businesses for profit edit. For everyone who keeps misreading my original comment, runs a healthcare business for profit, not earns a reasonable living wage from working in the healthcare industry. Different things. Answer: for the crowd in the back crying, "You go into business to make money, then don't claim it as non-for-profit." That just ends up being verbiage for tax evasion. There is an entire parasitic sect of healthcare executives that just bounce around bonused positions, and at least in America, most of the money is going towards them and grand marketing visions. Source: been in healthcare decades now, multiple networks, different roles, and it's the same everywhere in the US. There's never a dime when a ground floor department needs one, but O-levels bonuses never fall short. Don't let a hospital network with a religious veneer fool you either. St. Dollar Bill still rules there. Story 25. There are leaders and oligarchs right now committing atrocities, oppressing populations, or profiting from suffering. Hard to name just one, but the worst ones usually aren't on magazine covers. Story 26. Mitch McConnell single-handedly has brought about the destructive of democracy. Primary opponent of campaign finance laws, primary case citation for Citizens United was his fight against the FEC, primary defender of gerrymandering. The man doesn't regard anyone but himself as having any value. He uses the law as a weapon. He tries at every moment to disenfranchise the people and move the country towards oligarchy. The world would have been an infinitely better place if he had never been in it. He is hands down the most pathetic, slimy weasel of man that I've ever known of. Answer: he only exists to be reactionary and block every single thing that Democrats do, while being a massive fudge hypocrite and being fine with only passing Republican garbage, and blocked anything to do with U.S. healthcare dozens upon dozens of times. He didn't want a Democrat president adding anyone to SCOTUS, but once it was a Republican president, he had absolutely zero qualms with the idea, and he won't just fudge call it quits after having several medical episodes in public, largely due to age. He's a figurehead of everything wrong with the Republican Party and won't let go of his power. That he loves so much until he literally fudge dies. I think non-US commenters here don't understand the actual reach this guy has had on the whole US. I can't say what I want about Meanie McConnell without getting my comment removed. Story 27. I don't remember the name, but there's a Ross Kemp doco on him, a man in India that runs an organization that kidnaps young girls and sells them into prostitution. He admits to eliminate over 1,000 girls without remorse. Story 28. Casey Anthony take down her 3-year-old daughter, Kaylee Anthony, and then lied to everyone that the daughter was kidnapped. Kaylee's remains were found inside a trash bag. Evidence shows that the baby girl had tape around her mouth and nose and the use of chloroform. There were also apparently traces of blood in the car. There was undeniable proof that Casey did it, but somehow she was found not guilty. Now she is working as a legal advisor and has some videos on TikTok. She also did a documentary on Peacock, where she tried to paint herself as misunderstood. To this day, this case makes me and so many others furious, especially when you find out what she has done to her own child. The fact that she is roaming free is so unbelievably infuriating. Story 29. Evil in terms of intent or evil in terms of hurting the most people. They're not the same. Steve Miller has to be up there. Story 30. Chris Watts eliminate his whole family, including his unborn child, because he wanted to leave his wife. The documentary is a hard watch. Sick fudge. Story 31. David Turpin. He and his wife, who he married as an adult when she was 16, already abusive, had 13 children and kept them locked inside a house in what is basically Auschwitz-like conditions. They were so isolated and trapped that one girl even lived there until she was 29 and was not allowed to leave. When one girl finally escaped and called the police, they were discovered and had very little knowledge of the world. They never went outside. Their English skills were like that of a little kid. They were incredibly malnourished, and their house was absolutely trashed with dead pets and rotten food covering every floor. I think we talk about Hitler as the pinnacle of evil because he was so good at what he did. But we forget a lot of times that there are other people who would do exactly what Hitler did if given the chance. Watch the Turpin body cam footage on YouTube, but be careful if you're sensitive because it's blatant child abuse. One of the most insane things I've ever watched. It's like him and his wife had a little tiny concentration camp for their own children, complete with physical abuse, manipulation, humiliation, and aside from gas chambers, basically everything you would think of when you think of Auschwitz. Story 32. Stephen Miller. He's 39, so we'll be stuck with him for a while yet. A truly detestable sack of shoot. Story 33. I think an unchecked Ron DeSantis would have the potential to do some viciously inhumane things. There's clearly a sociopathy to his power trip and a total lack of empathy for anyone who doesn't advance his agenda. He's typically gleeful over the suffering of others. Evan finds it entertaining and humorous, as evidenced by his recent embrace of what are essentially concentration camps for undocumented immigrants. We need to keep an eye on this guy. Story 34. They live right in plain sight. It's the billionaire class who directly and knowingly cause millions of starvations a year. No person outside of that pile one, no matter how cruel and depraved, is more evil and heartless than the upper crust of capital. Story 35. Peter Thiel, Putin, Xi, Netanyahu, Trump, Musk, Charles Koch, Leonard Leo, Harlan Crow, Kim Jong-un. Story 36. All the billionaires should be classified as supervillains, wage theft, child labor, and whatever other shoot practices to build their empire. And now they have the ability to help people and fix things with their massive wealth. But do they? No. They seek even more ways to make money and more ways to commit crimes, like steal elections to further their own greed. Totally evil and usually on a massive scale. Story 37. I'm seeing a lot of unpopular folks in this thread, but are we really saying these people are worse than Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un? How about the Ayatollah? Like, Shkreli is a giant douchebag, but I'm pretty sure concentration camps and bombing hospitals are maybe a little worse than securities fraud and gouging express scripts. Answer: there's probably a difference between the magnitude of a harm versus evil intentions. E.g., scientist entrepreneur who accidentally caused millions of deaths or serial killer who eliminate 15. Though dictators IMO do tick all boxes here, both magnitude and evil intentions, but the most evil of them are probably those who aren't as much on the headlines. For example, Min Aung Hlaing is a dictator in Myanmar. He bombed his own people in the villages, ordered tortures and mutilations of people who are still alive. That's not an ancient history. He started this 1 year before Putin began invasion of Ukraine. If he was in charge of a much more powerful country, he would do a lot more harm to the world than anything we can imagine. Story 38. Dennis Rader, BTK killer, expected people to just list a bunch of Republicans' conservative figures, and was right. But this dude is true evil. Story 39. David Turpin, the guy who he and his wife kept 13 of his starving children chained in their basement, would bake fresh pies and bring it down to tease them. I worked with the guy at my last job. He was an engineer, socially awkward but generally normal, insane. Story 40. I'd have to say Putin. I've seen so many civilian bombings and military takedown caught on camera, stemming from his needless invasion into Ukraine. His disregard for human life is atrocious. Story 41. Peter Scully, convicted pedophile and murderer, known for filming and distributing abuse videos of young girls. Story 42. Anders Behring Breivik is a Norwegian neo-Nazi terrorist and mass murderer. He carried out the 2011 Norway attacks in which he eliminated 8 people by detonating a van bomb at Regjøringskvartalet in Oslo, and then eliminate 69 participants of a Workers' Youth League, AUF, summer camp in a mass shooting on the island of Utøya. Story 43. It has to do with mass takedown, starvation, indiscriminate killings. So go the news and find who'd been championing this for the last 5 to 10, 20 years. There you will find your evil person. Story 44. Aliyev, joyfully starving people to drive them from their homeland, deserves a special place in hell. Story 45. Putin. There's a lot of evil people in the world, but half of the evil that's happening today wouldn't be possible without Putin's Russia. Story 46. Donald Trump has a child rapist, Epstein's intimacy trafficking partner, fraudster, thief, and cause of the most inhumane immigration policies. Story 47. This fellow named Bibi Netanyahu. I hear he's intentionally starving to passing a population of 1.8 million civilians. Story 48. Fudge Netanyahu. Why isn't he on top of the list? The devil been eliminate kids in thousands since he was a teen in the IDF. Story 49. Hard to say for sure, but probably someone we've never heard of because the most evil people don't trend on X. They fund the platforms. Story 50. Technically, any rich person with huge power that just manipulates everyone and everything and gets away with it. Story 51. My estranged mother. When this planet is rid of her, I will finally feel truly safe, and best believe I'm pulling up at the house for the goose painting in the bathroom. It will be mine. Story 52. If he's still alive, Pedro Alonso Lopez, Serial killer who has had between 110 and 300 victims across Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru. He's been a free man since 1998, but his current whereabouts are unknown. If he's still alive, he should be 76 years old. Story 53. Can't really decide who is the worst, but here's a list. Bashar al-Assad, president of Syria, 500,000 in Syrian civil war, including chemical attacks. Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, tens to hundreds of thousands. Chechnya, Ukraine, repression. Kim Jong-un, supreme leader of North Korea, 100,000s from famine, prison camps, political executions. Mohammed bin Salman, crown, prince of Saudi Arabia, tens of thousands. Yemen conflict, internal crackdowns. Rodrigo Duterte, former president of the Philippines, 6,000 or 30,000 dollars. Extrajudicial killings in substances war. Felipe Calderón, former president of Mexico, 60,000 substances war-related deaths. Mengistu Haile Mariam, former leader of Ethiopia, 502 senozens. Red Terror, famine. There are more, of course, but I thought these are the worst. Story 54. Andrew Wakefield, the fraudster and disgraced former doctor who started the lies about links between autism and vaccines. I know, he didn't take down anyone in a gruesome way or molest children, but he's likely responsible for millions of deaths and continues to publicly oppose vaccines long after he was exposed as a fraud. I'm certain that he knows he's full of shoot and chooses to profit off the sickness and passing of others. Story 55. William Samoei Ruto, Kenya's president. If you look up the word evil in any dictionary, you'll see a pic of him in the definitions section, holding a banner written evil. He's an ICC suspect and was the chief proponent of 2007-2008 post-election violence in Kenya, where more